So, Boris Johnson's deal is apparently all done. The EU like it as much as they can, but it's not really surprising as it's more or less the same as Theresa May's deal. The only real difference is domestic obligations, which are so much worse. They're just so much worse. It's also important to point out that Theresa May's deal was done, I think it was about 3 months before it was brought up in Parliament. So MPs had plenty of time to go through it and critique all the little figgly bits. This bit we don't like, this bit we don't like. There's not really enough protection to workers' rights and human rights. That was my biggest concern of it. Bojo is going to bring this bill before Parliament on Saturday. Or rather, this proposal, I should say, this proposal on Saturday. So while we've got a few things out, MPs are not going to have enough time to go through the whole thing. So essentially, they're going to be asked to vote on something that they don't really know what's in it because they've not really had the time to go through it. Remember, Brexit's about taking the power back. That's apparently, yeah. But the bits that we do know, again, my biggest issue with Theresa May's last deal, apart from it being to leave the EU in general, was human rights and workers' rights. So now I bring this up a lot of the time because, again, a number of prominent Conservative members of Parliament and now and before prominent members of the cabinet, like Dominic Raab, that moron who didn't understand how important Dover is when it comes to imports and exports, have consistently said they do not believe in workers' rights, they want to get rid of workers' rights, and they do not believe in human rights. We had some vague kind of legal protection with May's deal. In my opinion, and a lot of others, it wasn't anywhere near good enough. But in Boris's deal, that hate-filled, disgusting wretch of a human being, it's now completely removed from all kind of legal obligations. It's still in there, but it's under a political obligation. And a political obligation means nothing. It's like writing down anything on the back of a napkin. It means nothing. Legally speaking, if it's in the legalized section and the government breaks it, well, they could face severe ramifications depending on which watchdog goes after them and the backing and so forth. But when it's under just a political declaration, yes, we promise we will do this. No, we're not going to put it into law, but we promise because we're trustworthy, and then they don't do it, you haven't got a leg to stand on. So human rights and workers' rights, something that the Conservatives have been consistently saying that they want to get rid of for years, are now on the chopping block more than ever before because now they're not even under the legal obligations, they're just under party promises that have been broken umpteen goddamn times already. Then, of course, you've got the border. Now, political Brexiteers, and when I'm in this part, I'm just talking about the politicians who promote Brexit all the time. So Brexiteers have constantly said there do not need to be a backstop. Don't need a backstop. Nobody wants the backstop. The Irish don't want the backstop. The English don't want the backstop. The European Union don't want the backstop. Nobody needs the backstop. Well, except, yeah, you kind of do, because without the backstop, you get what we have now, which is a physical border that instead of being two borders in Ireland, the north of Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland, it will now run down the sea. So effectively, it breaks up the United Kingdom. Now, it's important to note that Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's on Twitter touting and spouting how fantastic his BFF's deal is, well, a few months ago, he was saying that he would never ever support something that put a border down the Irish Sea. In fact, Bojo himself said he would never support something that would go down the Irish Sea. But it's important to point out the hypocrisy and the lies of these repulsive people because Jacob Rees-Mogg also said, yes, there'd be a referendum. There should probably be 2, maybe even 3 referendums, just so people know exactly what they're getting. But after we have the referendum, then we'd have to negotiate the bill. And then after we've got the negotiated bill, we'd have to bring that back to the people and let the people vote on it. And then we could crack on with it. That's what Jacob Rees-Mogg said. Obviously, he didn't say it in those words, because I can't imagine that man even knows how to use crack on in a sentence. But that's what he said, which is very different to what he's saying now. And Bojo, well, I mean, there's many lies I could go for with Bojo. But I think I'm going to go with what he said when he was mayor. When he said if they dared to do work on Heathrow, he would lay down in front of the bulldozers. Of course, they started doing work on Heathrow, and Boris just left the country. It amazes me that people believe him when he says he'd rather die in a ditch than remain in the European Union after October 31st. This man is a pathological liar, and yet people still believe him. Anyway, so the problem is now, yes, if this bill goes forward, or if this proposal goes through and our members of parliament vote for it, we would have effectively lost our human rights, our workers' rights, and we would have destroyed the United Kingdom. Because Scotland are going to see the damage. The SNP are going to promote this as a reason to leave the United Kingdom, because we've already kicked out Northern Ireland. English politicians who constantly showed their ignorance on the Irish border, of Irish history, of the Good Friday Agreement, threw Northern Ireland under the bus. That will be used as a reason for Scottish independence, and it could very, very well work. I know in the past it's been a bit hit and miss, and yeah, but this could be something that puts the final nail in the coffin, which will destroy the United Kingdom, because then it's just England and Wales. And while if I remember off the top of my head, Wales voted to leave the European Union after October 31st, when we've left, or if we've left, that day one damage is going to start to make people think. And after a few months, maybe even after a year, well, eventually they're going to have to look at what they actually got from the EU. Now, British Brexiteers, and when I say this, I'm referring to Brexiteer politicians this time, will most certainly blame the EU for everything bad that happens. Despite the overwhelming experts that come forward and said, no, this bad thing will happen, this bad thing will happen, despite the NHS saying, look, we're not going to be able to have a steady flow of drugs. That we really won't, and this is the exact reason why, and it's not being addressed. Brexiteer people will still blame the EU for that because, again, as I said in the previous video, they just don't get what the European Union does, what it's there for, and the benefits we get from it. But that's the situation that we're in. Now, of course, this proposal goes forward on Saturday, and there's 2 things that could happen. Now, I can't see the DUP voting for this bill because it does effectively separate Northern Ireland. It separates Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK, which is not something the DUP like. But Bojo could have said behind closed doors, and again, this is just speculation, but Bojo could have said, look, vote for it, because if I can get people to vote for it, I'm just going to turn it around at the end and just not do it. It's a way of me avoiding the Ben Act, so I won't have to ask for an extension. See? Sneaky. And in my opinion, that would be the only reason why the DUP vote for it. Because that would circumvent the Ben Act. If Parliament votes for this deal, then the Ben Act becomes null and void because they voted for a deal. And even then, even if they do, we're still facing a no-deal Brexit because there isn't time to sort anything out. I've said this 100 times over. 10,000 lorries come through Dover every single day. That is only possible with frictionless trade. If we do not have an agreement with the European Union, that frictionless trade stops like that, because that is the reality of the world we live in. 10,000 lorries cannot come through Dover if they are being checked, and that is what will be required. This is where drug shortages come in from. Now, I had a back and forth with someone on one of my previous videos about European Union, and the idea that people will just buy more drugs so that they can stop up. Well, that's not exactly what the NHS is recommending. And again, if you're taking more drugs out of the country, out of circulation, then you haven't got them. Second thing is, especially when it comes to drugs in the UK, yes, the NHS is stockpiling, but they're not stockpiling all drugs, and these stockpiles are not in the UK. They're either in Belgium or in Berlin. I forget which one, but it's definitely one of the two. They're not in the UK. And as I said in a video specifically about that, it doesn't tackle the problem. The stock supplies are there, but we still can't get them because we haven't got frictionless trade, and we have no route of getting them in that will keep them in circulation in times for the demand. If you are diabetic and you need insulin to live, you should be sweating bullets, because this country doesn't make insulin. We import every single bit of it. And we are going to face severe problems with this. Now, of course, there is always the hope that MPs will not fall for Bojo's destructive, repulsive, hypocritical deal. His surrender deal. In which case, Boris should be forced to sign the letter, and we should get the extension, even though there are rumours that even Juncker doesn't want the extension. But of course, it doesn't come down to Juncker. He can advise. It's not really anything anyone can advise, but it comes down to the 28, and the chances are, with the work that's been done beforehand, that they're more likely to give us a long extension so that we can get ready. Now, I've said 100 times, I'm a firm Remainer. I'm a proud Remainer, or a proud Romona. But I expect to leave the European Union with no deal, because that's what the elites want, and typically multimillionaires get their way. But we haven't got anything in place to get ready for it. Not a single goddamn thing. And in 3 years, we have done nothing to get ready. So the best case of the worst scenario, we're given time and we actually have a government that starts working on things to mitigate the damage and to actually get us ready for a no-deal Brexit. But considering that the cabinet is full of repulsive human beings like Dominic Raab, Prabhu Patel, Boris Johnson, and so on, can't see that happening. It's kind of a scary time to be in the UK.